Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Barham Engines. So we'll just give you a little update of what we've got going on in the workshop at the minute. We have a Kubota block on the boring bar. This is a 4-cylinder Kubota, and we are putting liners in it. Now, these are the liners that we're putting in. If you notice, they're a straight liner. You do know that I normally like using the top hat liner, so we put the flange at the top of the block, press the liner down to the flange seats, and then the gasket basically seals on the flange. Although the only liner we can get for this length and size is a straight liner. So what I'm doing is, you see down the bottom there, there's a step that we leave right down the bottom, and basically what we do is trim the liner. We measure from the step to the top of the block, and then we trim the liner and leave it sort of 1 mil proud, and then push the liner down with a 3 thou interference, a bit of Loctite at the bottom, and then we just face the block afterwards and then bore the liner to a standard size. We've got a brand new set of pistons here which are a standard size, so that is what we do. So we're just on our last bore now, as you can see. So my plan is to get all these little boring jobs out, excuse the pun. These barrels here, we've got 3 barrels from Arc ATVs. We have a steady stream of barrels for those. These are for quads, Honda quads usually. So what my plan has been for the last 2 days is to drop the Cosworth for a minute. That engine there is all done, just waiting for the turbo. Now I spoke to Vince from Turbo Performance yesterday, who's got the turbo. Basically it was a T3 standard turbo, and we're getting it converted to a T38 that's good for just over 450 horsepower. I spoke to Vince, because usually he's pretty quick at turning them round, but he said that they have been waiting for the front T34 housings from Garrett. I was waiting for 18 of them from America, I think it is, and they should be here beginning of next week. So once he's got them, he can then machine that housing out, which will be good for the T38, and then we'll have that back. So hopefully the end of next week, that engine will all be done, invoiced, on the pallet and ready to go. You can see I've trimmed this liner down to the length that I want it. It's just roughly about 1 millimetre above the surface of the block it will end up. This is the original liner, so what I do is I just leave there, just mark it at the length I want, and then we stick it in the lathe. And what I do is just line the tool up with the mark, scribe a little line on there, and just part that off. So I'm just getting my liners in now. You can see that I've trimmed them. That first one I put in is about 1 millimetre above the surface of the block, which is absolutely ideal. Just pushing this one down now. You can see in the next few seconds that's going to bottom out on that bottom flange. There we go. So as you can see, we are on the last bore of this Land Rover, and this has had to go out 30 thou. This is the first block that John started, and I'm just sort of finishing. So because it's going out 30 thou, and to be honest, it's easier to do it on here because we've got a couple of jobs on the boring bar, so we're just honing this out 30 thou with the coarse stones. But yeah, I'm just finishing the last bore here, and then I'll leave it to cool over lunch, and then we're going to put the fine stones in and just finish hone it, and then this block is done then. Right, this engine here is an MG Midget that we did October last year for a restoration company. Actually, we've done 3 or 4 engines for them, and we also did the Ford gearbox. Now he rang us up saying that it's leaking oil from the rear main seal quite badly, you know, as in a drip every couple of seconds, and it's leaking oil from either side of the cylinder head. So I'm just going to go in the office where it's a bit quieter and just sort of tell you about this situation here. So the Midget 1275. So the story is, it's the same customer as we did the video recently about the Type 9 gearbox, the one that we rebuilt, not reconditioned. Anyway, I had a phone call on this one, rebuilt the engine back in October, and it was a complete go through, you know. But it is the early Midget 1275 with the no rear main seal. It has the scroll on the back of the crank, so with the thrower. So the idea is the scroll goes the opposite way to the crank. Any oil that goes on there gets sort of pushed back into the crankcase on the scroll, therefore it doesn't really leak. But basically all we can do when we build these engines, when we have them to bits, is obviously grind the crankshaft. The rear scroll we measure has to be absolutely perfect, as does the housing. This one was. Usually they are, because they don't really, there's no sort of contact, it's just a very close sort of fit. But yeah, this was perfect. Anyway, customer rings up saying he's got 2 little oil leaks from the cylinder head. So these are oil leaks coming down the block very slightly from the cylinder head, and he's also got one from the rear seal. We said, okay, that's fine. Obviously, have you done a couple of 100 miles in it? No, I haven't done many miles at all. Said, right, we'll just do a couple of 100 miles and then you've got to retorque the cylinder head. So yeah, he does that. He says, still no better. So, and he said he's got this real bad rear leak coming out of, between the block and the gearbox. It's sort of a drip every couple of seconds. So yeah, fairly bad. He then sort of says, when are you going to get it in? Starts pushing us. We said, look, we are very, very busy, but obviously this is something we want to get sorted out fairly smartish. So we arranged for someone to pick the car up, get it back to us. Within a day and a half, we've got the engine out and got it on the bench. We've got the head off. We've replaced this. Both faces were faces, absolutely perfect. Looks like it's been running fine, but it's just weeping on the outer edge. And you normally find this on the old stuff because the head torques aren't very much. And the gasket, this was a fibre gasket, which is usually more forgiving. But what you tend to do, if you use like a copper gasket, what some people do is put like a Heldite sealer around the outside of the head and the block, just a very thin layer, put the gasket on, head down, and that sort of cures any sort of outward leaks. But in this case, it was a fibre gasket. I mean, you never know. We always buy them from reputable dealers, but you never know what the quality's like. It's very difficult to tell. Obviously, nothing's original anymore. It's all aftermarket for this old stuff. So yeah, that was that. We sorted that. We put a copper gasket on. We've sealed the outer edge. So fingers crossed that cures that. That job there could have been done in the car, but obviously because of this rear seal leak, we've took the engine out for him and sort of had a look. We've took the sump off, took the cap off, the rear main cap, had a look. It's absolutely perfect, and it is leaking from there. It's not leaking from the pump. The oil pump is a bit further up on the back of the block, and it's got a sort of cup that goes over the top, which has got to be sealed correctly with the back plate that goes over the top that the gearbox bolts to. Yeah, that was all good. There's no signs of leaks whatsoever. So it is definitely coming out of this scroll. So I've rang him up and said, look, it's one of those where everything's perfect. You probably didn't notice it leaking before because it was plastered in oil, as some of these old cars are. They're absolutely caked in oil underneath the car. It's just the way it was back then, I said, everything measures perfect. It's, absolutely as it should be, really. I said, the only thing is, we have spoke to a couple of other specialists, and also, I know forums can be a nightmare, but if you're quite knowledgeable and you know what you're looking for, they can be quite helpful to go on these owners club sites and just these forums and just see if they have had this problem that you're experiencing. Went on a forum, there's plenty of guys on there, said they've had the same thing. What they tend to do is run it on the lower side of the oil on the dipstick, and they run a 2050 high mileage oil, and as I say, just on the lower end of the dipstick, and just doing that allows not so much throw to sort of send oil out the back of this scroll. I said, they say that they do that and it cures it. He wasn't having any of that. He said, so what you're saying, I should run no oil in the side? I said, not saying that. I said, they just say run it on the lower side of the dipstick, and they use the 2050 high mileage oil. It tends to get rid of it. He said, oh, right, well, they do a rear modified seal kit. And I said, yeah, they do for a lot of old stuff. And this is the kit in question. So this bolts onto, on the old cap, you've got this insert that goes above, behind the flange of the crank, which what the flywheel goes on. This bolts to the block, as does this. And then it holds, it basically sits over the crank. This is in two halves, sits over the back of the crank where the scroll is, just in front of it. And then this seal goes inside. And that seal there rubs on the back of the large flange where the flywheel goes onto. So that there, it cures the oil leak. So the reason for making this is because they do obviously have that problem. It doesn't say that they only have that problem if they're knackered or worn out. They do this for a reason. He said, well, how come you didn't do that in the first place? And I said, well, because when we recondition an engine, we can recondition it to the original specs of the engine. If the owner wants anything modified, bearing in mind, with a lot of these old stuff, a lot of these old engines, they do a lot of modified little bits throughout the engine. We don't take every engine and modify, put every modification you can buy for that engine on it. We just don't do it because it's, it's one of those things for us where some of this stuff can be, it's obviously very time consuming. If you sort of gave an estimate, or the customer's stuck to a budget, or agreed on an estimate, you don't want to start going buying things like this and fitting it, because before you know it, you're £1,000-2,000 up on what you've estimated. So yeah, that's the reason we don't. We suggest a lot of things, and we put it on our sort of invoice of notes to sort of recommend things like this. But at the end of the day, it's ultimately up to the customer to decide whether they want to put any modifications on. The only other thing is if the customer recommends to put one of these on, although it's supposed to cure things, it isn't an original item. It's not what the manufacturer put on originally. Although it is supposedly be a benefit, we can only put it in the disclaimer that we're not held responsible if it leaks. So it's one of those, really. All we can do is check the crank, check the housing, make sure the scroll's perfect diameter, and we put it back together as it should be. Well, he wasn't having that either. He seems to think that we should have put this on originally, and we sort of disagree with that. The whole point of this vlog here really is to sort of see whether you guys agree with him or agree with us. It's one of those. We're going to... Yes, I know we've sorted the cylinder head out, we put a new head gasket, but we could have done that in the vehicle. There's been several hours taking the engine out, stripping the bottom end, etc., to do the checks and what have you, and now we've got to fit this. So yeah, there's a little bit of a debate on who pays for what with this, really. We're more than sort of willing to sort out the issues that are down to us, but if everything measures perfect, my feeling is this really isn't down to us. As I say, if he wanted this modified kit, he obviously knew that they did them. Why didn't he suggest it in the first place? So yeah, you may think differently, guys. You may think that is down to us, but let us know down in the comments. Be really interested to see what you think about that. But yeah, we're going to fit this kit anyway. He supplied it. He's got it sent here. He's at this stage. We've had the engine took out by Stuart and Pete over at Alfa Ragazzi. We're going to fit this kit, and we're going to sort of argue who pays for what at the end of it. But yeah, be interesting to see what you guys say about that. So it's the end of the day, guys, end of the week, Friday afternoon. Be glad to go home now. See the kit cars in here, all prepped, ready to go for Sunday. We're back down Perranporth. I know we're doing that track to death at the minute, but we are going to be booking some tracks a bit further field for next month and the month after. Hopefully, we've got to do Thruxton. We want to do Castle Combe. I want to do Donington Brands, a few decent tracks like that. So at the moment, we're just sort of getting to grips with the car. It's great down there because it's a short circuit. It's great to get used to the car. Last track day that I went out on, I was really to get into grips with this, really getting to know how far I can push the car, getting to know the grip levels. Because it's a light car, it's almost a little bit sort of tricky to understand the grip levels and how hard you can brake and how hard you can push it, because they do handle fantastic compared to most other cars. So yeah, really enjoying that at the minute. As you can see here, we have gone and bought our own trailer. We were kindly lent a trailer for the last three track days from one of our customers, Mac, over at Clover Cars. He was lending us his trailer, so top lad there. We owe him big time, but we thought it was about time we went and bought our own trailer. So this is a 180 width, 4 metre long, perfect for the track car. It's quite a nice light trailer. It's absolutely brand new, and we got it at a steal. So thanks to Mick at Monster Engineering Services up in Wolverhampton. Fantastic bloke to deal with, and we got this at a real steal. So yeah, happy with that. So what we got going on quickly, the Jaguar over there. In the next video, we're going to tell you a bit more about that. We've got the go-ahead on the Jaguar. The gentleman came in this morning to see us and have a chat about the estimate, and he's more than happy to go ahead with that. It was one of those really where you've got a car that's probably worth, what, 15 grand? Worth nothing as it is, but you're sort of 3/4 almost there to repair the car as it is. But if he likes it, you're going to end up with an engine good, a new supercharger and all the rest of it. It's one of them really, guys. It's probably a sum that he didn't really want to spend, but he gets his car back and it'll all be good hopefully at the end of it. So yeah, be sort of running through that a bit more in the next video. The Cosworth here, the one with the done bottom end, we've got the go-ahead on that one as well. He's I spoke to him a couple of days ago and said, look, told him the situation, what we've got with both short engines and the head and that, and I said, look, we can make you a good engine out of what we've got here. Do you want me to sort of put something together and send you over an estimate? He wouldn't really fuss with that. He said, no, just crack on, we need a decent motor. So that is a go-ahead. So yeah, got plenty more on the go, guys. Managed to get on with some of the boring jobs today. Almost done the Kubota block. Now all I've got to do is just finish boring it for the pistons, face the block and hone it. But I haven't been left alone this afternoon. I've had phone calls and customers left, right and centre. Got another engine come in over there, which that ain't going to be touched for a week or two. But that is a Vauxhall 2 litre. Been sitting, no known problems, but been sitting for 18 years untouched. So he wants to make something funky out of that. It's going in an Opel Manta that he's restoring. So that's got to not only look nice, he's going to have some trick bits, throttle bodies, all the rest of it. So yeah, quite looking forward to getting in amongst that, but it certainly ain't going to be yet. Well, thanks ever so much for watching, guys. I'll be interested to see some of the comments that you put down below on the 1275 Midget, what we're responsible for, what you think, and what we should be charging out. We'll sort of leave that up to you, really, what you think. But yeah, have a great weekend. Thanks a lot, guys and gals. And we will see you in another one. You take care. Have a great weekend. Cheers.